All right, let's maul. You know what? Let's mauled. AOC talking to NPR. This is gonna put me in a bad mood. So let's put myself even more of a bad mood. AOC on NPR. Let's go. AOC is somebody who, quite frankly, is what I like to call squandered potential, which is she has ensconced herself with the most annoying rad lib culture of DC. So her takes are going to be bad. But hey, maybe she'll surprise me.
Is one of the Democratic Party's biggest stars. When she was first elected in 2018, she was very much an outsider, a social media phenomenon, often a critic of her party's programs and leaders. Now she's seen as more of an insider, a somewhat more senior figure, still a big star. And so we brought her here to Studio One to...
Wow, she's seen as more of an insider. Wow, great. And what did that get her? Fucking nothing.
Ask what she thinks her party can do with its current
leadership position.
Dilemma. Democrats are out of power in Washington. They're watching President Trump enact his agenda, and they know the president has great appeal with a large part of their traditional base, the working class, people Ocasio-Cortez would feel that she would like to represent. Here's some of our conversation. And I want to begin with how you see your party as an opposition party at the moment. If you had to pick one word,
Pathetic.
what is a word that describes
Losers.
the state of your party right?
Losers, pathetic, disarray, unorganized, capitulating, compromisers, collaborators, losers, failures, scared,
Now,
complicit.
I think a word to describe the state of the party is...
All right, off the bat, it's making me laugh right off the bat. Because she's thinking all the thoughts I said, and she's like, okay, I can't say losers, pathetic, failures, capitulating. She's got to be like, she's going to say something like, in flux. Transitional.
Resolved?
If
I had to pick...
Resolved? They're saying how they need to surrender.
One word, it would be resolved.
it's not shocked
That's the
or
worst word I've ever heard. What? She thought that long and delivered resolved? Come on, man. You've been at this a while. Alex, you've been at this a while. You got to do better than resolved.
dismayed or anything like that at this moment?
I mean, in
On
this
the defensive?
moment, I think we've moved through shock. I think we've moved through dismay. I think we've moved through the 5 stages of grief. I think we've moved through that defensiveness. But it is, I think, a rapidly evolving situation. And I would say this week, especially in the light of last night's budget vote, the moment right now today is resolve.
We're talking here on a Wednesday, the night before there was this budget vote. Every single Democrat voted no. Mm-hmm. Do you consider that an accomplishment that your party was united, even if it was united in a no?
Yes. I mean, of course, if we were not united in yesterday's vote, I think we would be
Have
in
you considered the fact that the party of bipartisanship never being able to convince any Republicans to ever join in with your nose might say something about how fucking pathetic you are? Have you considered that?
far deeper trouble. But the fact that there is this much unity
you would do the same thing. I could never be in this situation. I could never be in this situation because I speak my mind too openly.
It's important. It is, I think, a baseline prerequisite for the moment to come and the fight over Medicaid, Medicare, and frankly, huge swaths of the American economy.
Do you assume that Republicans are going to give you the issues that are going to allow you to come back?
I do not make that assumption. I do not believe that.
Okay, thank God. Thank God there's still some AOC left inside. Thank God. What he's asking her, by the way, the reason why I'm pausing so much is because this is so funny already. But basically what he's asking her is an assumption that the Democrats are making. The big assumption that Democrats are making is that, and this is true, thermostatic opinion. People are just going to react against Trump and they're going to vote for Democrats because they're the only other choice. Right? Like that is basically what she is saying. Or that's what the Democrats are saying. And she's saying, no, I don't think that's true. I don't think we could just assume we're going to win. Because the other Democrats, they don't want to make any changes. They just want to sit around and then be handed the majority again, like they were in 2018. They just want to wait 2 years and then they'll get handed the majority again. And they can go back to grifting. All right. That's what they want to do. They don't want to do anything different than they've been doing. They want to do the same strategy they've been doing since 1988. Republican light.
Elections are given. I don't think of them. I know many people think of them as natural pendulum swings, and I completely understand why that is. But I believe that in order for us to not just win a majority, but to win decisive majority.
My opinion about force the vote is that it literally would not have meant anything. But now with the full balance of time, I also don't think I see what the big fight over it was. It's like this, they kind of were right that the squad has found itself in no man's land. They're not willing to completely abandon the left and difficult positions like on Gaza, but they're also not willing to actually take on the establishment. So they find themselves in a position where they don't have any allies. They're sitting out there in no man's land getting picked off. They're not bravely making an attack. And maybe it's the charge of the Light Brigade. Maybe they would just get gunned down and fail. But they're not even trying to take on the establishment. And on the other hand, they haven't completely abandoned some of the most difficult and dangerous positions. And it's like, if you're going to hold to some of the most difficult, dangerous positions, why not go for a win? Why sit back and hope they suddenly get a change of heart? It's like this very like feckless and kind of just frankly stupid approach.
That allow us to govern. We need to be as strategic and tactical as possible. But I do believe that the Republican Party is making certain large errors right now and that they are underestimating the public.
What are the errors?
I think that issuing a mandate to the Energy and Commerce Committee to cut $880 billion specifically, they are creating certain very specific numerical mandates in the budget cuts, and they're demanding them from very specific areas that make it nearly impossible for them to keep their promises.
$880 billion is the cut over 10 years from Medicaid, if I'm not mistaken.
From the Energy and Commerce Committee, whose jurisdiction is overwhelmingly Medicaid and Medicare, correct?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you think that is a mistake that will come back to them? Why?
President Trump has gone on the record saying we're not going to touch Medicaid. The Republican Party is saying over and over again, we are not going to cut Medicaid. We are not going to touch Medicare. And they cannot consistently hold both the $880 billion cut promise and not touching Medicaid.
Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, said just this week, come on, there's waste, fraud, and abuse. We're going to cut it out without affecting anybody's benefits. You don't believe that?
Sure. I think you can cut a bit here and there, but it does not add to $880 billion. Just last night, Republicans were saying...
Well, if you wanted to cut a bunch of money, you know what you would do, chat? You would negotiate all drug prices and you would get rid of Medicare Advantage. And that right there would get you hundreds of billions of dollars. But that would hurt major corporations. So that's a no. Kind of
the highest water number that they could find was $50 billion. And that is if you cast the widest net and adopt all of their definitions of what waste is, what abuse is, long-term care, children's health insurance, that's still $50 billion. And they're talking about $880 billion. I mean, the math in what they are offering as waste does not square with the price tag and the mandate that they've been given.
So what happens at the other end? Ordinary people don't lose health care, I guess, but what happens, do you believe, if that cut actually becomes reality, which is another question as to whether it ever happens?
Yeah, well, if that cut becomes reality, it's important for people to understand not just are people going to be thrown off of Medicaid, not only are Medicare recipients who receive, for example, long-term care benefits from Medicaid going to be affected, but people who are not on Medicaid are likely going to see their health insurance premiums go up, because the more people get kicked off of Medicaid, the more uninsured people there are in the United States, the more they use ERs, the more that they go directly to hospitals for care, and the cost of uninsured people is oftentimes then borne in health insurance premiums as well, and deductibles.
The erosion of Democratic Party support among working class voters has been pretty well documented. Mm-hmm. It seems to cross racial and other lines. It's real, and Democrats have talked a lot about what they maybe did wrong and the way that they spoke or the way they approached people or the way that they acted. But I want to flip that around a little bit. What do you think President Trump has done right that has appealed to traditional Democratic constituencies?
I think that some of his campaign promises, he does a good job of pairing what I would say some of the largest giveaways to the 1% and elites with very tangible policy promises.
No tax on tips.
Exactly. You take no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. These things sound great. They also directly appeal to very specific pockets of people who tend to be working class. And that creates a permission structure, right? You toss a crumb to us and you give the farm to the big fish. And I think
that's how our society works in general. You know what I mean? Like, that's no different than the everyday practice of our political economy. So, except, you know, so people are seeing their lives improve, even though the rich are getting even more. That's always how it's been. In fact, they don't have contact with the rich. So that's really, I mean, it is what it is.
Very sophisticated in how he tailors those things together.
Some of those promises are things that Democrats themselves would like. Capping interest rates on credit cards, to give one example.
I'm not going to do any of those things. I'll believe it when I see it.
Has there been some discussion among Democrats that, I mean, you're almost a little envious? He's gotten ahead of you on some of these issues.
Well, the credit card interest rate cap is my bill from 2019 with Senator Sanders. And we're having some bipartisan momentum on it. Senator Hawley is interested in working with Senator Sanders and myself. I've also have been working with some Republican colleagues. But it is a signal that Republicans understand the trouble that they are in trying to pursue their own agenda in a very naked form. They need certain fig leaves, and they are sophisticated about that. But I think what people are seeing now is that increasingly they feel lied to, right? That these were campaign promises. Maybe they'll pass, maybe they don't, maybe they won't. But there is, I think, a slingshot effect that's happening right now when people are seeing the mass layoffs in the federal workforce, the cutoffs in life-saving research, the real discussions from Elon Musk calling Medicaid recipients and people who receive SNAP and other food assistance a parasite class. And I think people are realizing that the fig leaf was the fig leaf, and it wasn't actually, you know, what's on the box wasn't what's inside.
Do you think the president has changed the subject effectively since he was elected?
I don't think he's changed the subject. I think he is who he's always been. But I think certainly some people feel that way.
I think of another aspect of this, though. Dean Phillips, one of your fellow Democratic members, was on television this past week, Fox News, as a matter of fact, and he appeared to wish Democrats acted a little more like Trump in this way. He wished that they would appeal to business people, to get smart people into government, to talk about efficiency. He seemed to wish Democrats would do what Elon Musk is doing, even if he doesn't agree with the way that Elon Musk is doing it.
I would say that instead of appealing to other politicians, we should be appealing to the American people. And if you ask the American people what they think of what Elon Musk and Doge are doing with government right now, they are vehemently opposed. The reactions right now are not just in Democratic districts, they're in Republican districts. Even Republicans in my district, they're saying, I voted for Trump. I did not vote for Elon Musk. I did not vote for this. I did not vote for mass buyouts of the federal workforce. We did not vote for the corruption of gutting NASA and then having the contracts go to SpaceX. We did not vote.
I mean, like, honestly, the United States of America is going to suffer such catastrophic damage from this administration that it's going to put us so behind the curve of China that it's almost like maybe that's kind of a good thing. Like, it's obviously doing a lot of harm to regular Americans, and I object to that, and I think that sucks. But it's going to make America's ability to be the kind of like global hegemon permanently damaged. And I think that would be good for the US. I think the US is chastised and contained into, instead of the world hegemon, to, you know, a strong world power. That's where America could kind of focus more on itself and kind of like take stock of itself and be like, wow, you know, our population is shrinking now and our economy is shrinking and our quality of life is going down. You know, I think that's going to set us up for long-term success in the future. So the more damage he does, you know, the more it's going to become readily apparent that we need radical change. Competitive with China is militaristic thinking. That's the way they think, man, not me. And the further they slink behind China, the less the United States will be able to commit wars abroad.
Or Starlink to start replacing critical FAA operations.
Which is the thing that's in the news. It's being discussed. Okay.
Yes. And I think that there is a very, very deep corruption at the core of this. If Elon Musk wanted to divest himself of his businesses and enter public service with his so-called business expertise, that is his prerogative. But so long as he maintains a vested financial interest in gutting the federal government, he is acting in his own self-interest and not those of the American people.
I want to underline who we're talking about here, who you think is concerned about this. They're blue state voters who voted for Donald Trump. New York was more for Trump this time than in past elections. Your district was more for Trump than in past elections. And you've had social media discussions with people who voted both for you and for Donald Trump. Do you truly believe, though, that that class of voters is paying attention and cares about the details of what you see as corruption and exactly the way that Musk is going about what he's doing for Trump?
Oh, yeah. I'm hearing it. I'm seeing it. And I represent a district that is very working class. And by that, I mean that I engage in a tremendous amount of constituent services. This is not the kind of district that is where town halls are typically filled to the absolute brim. People are working 2 jobs. They're doing these kinds of things. I am getting emails. I am getting phone calls. I had a telephone town hall last week that had really high numbers of attendance of people. And we ask, out of all of these attacks on immigration, the assault on Medicaid, the budget conversation, and Musk's access to government, which is the thing you are most concerned about? And overwhelmingly, even I'm surprised, Overwhelmingly, the answer is they are concerned about this incursion in what they see as corruption into the federal government.
To what extent is immigration as an issue part of your problem with working class voters?
I mean, I guess my question would be what does the word problem mean?
People voting for the other side and not for you.
Yeah.
Feeling that Democrats are not serious about the issue in ways that concern them.
I think that we have a problem on immigration because of the lack of progress that we've had on this issue. And as we know, Republicans weaponize that lack of progress. Of course, there was famously a bipartisan bill last year that the Republican majority in the Senate and also in the House were willing to pass. President Biden was willing to work with them on it. And Donald Trump said, do not solve this problem. As long as it is broken, then...
I mean, this is just sad. This is just sad. See, this is what happens when you get into DC and you just start listening to these like talking points and they actually don't make sense. The first half of her thing was true. The lack of progress on immigration, meaning we didn't pass any policies to like make immigration system functional in this country. After running on it again, we didn't do it. Then the part which she's not mentioning, which is the most important part, which is Joe Biden's warmongering foreign policy that was focused on ruinous sanctions on Venezuela and Cuba, causing economic crises that sent millions of economic migrants to our borders. So, you know, like that is a reality. You know, the United States destabilizes countries in Latin America and they send millions of workers here and then we're surprised. How about we stop the militarism abroad? We lift the sanctions on Venezuela and Cuba. We treat them like good neighbors. We disagree with some of their political takes. We disagree with it. You know, the United States is more than willing to do business with Saudi Arabia. So I don't want to hear that it's about human rights or some other bullshit. Okay. Like, who gives a shit? Operate in a non-interventionist manner. And then we build immigration systems that are actually functional for our country and for social cohesion. But instead, it's like, oh, well, we stole all the Republican immigration policies and then they didn't vote for it. And it's like, well, no shit.
It will be politically beneficial for us. And so it is a problem not just for Democrats. It's a problem for the entire country that Republicans do not want to solve any sort of issue with immigration. They are completely uninterested in addressing undocumented people, in addressing a path to citizenship.
Well, they do want to address undocumented people by removing them. I mean, that's what the president is attempting now. Even
then, you see what Republicans did with the Lake and Riley Act recently in their passage with it, in that they authorized the complete gutting of due process. So now you can take a DACA recipient, a dreamer, just accuse them of a crime.
And deport them.
And however, they also understand that they don't even have the infrastructure to do that. So they're actually creating it's not even about creating a deportation pipeline. They are creating a private prison camp pipeline. So they're still creating pipelines to just increase this problem here in the United States.
Why do you think this issue did seem to be a political loser for Democrats among key groups and key constituencies, if what you say is true?
I think that a lack of a path to citizenship in the United States, the lack of addressing comprehensive immigration reform, creates a large population of undocumented people in the United States. And that is allowed to be weaponized in many ways. We have a large population of undocumented people in the United States. Overwhelmingly, it is not because they crossed the southern border of the United States. It's because they came here in a documented fashion and overstayed a visa and became undocumented. And it is the lack of ability for us to expand paths to citizenship, modernize paths to citizenship over decades that create this bubbling issue that Republicans are allowed to weaponize.
And you have voters in places like Arizona, which is a swing state that Democrats lost, or Colorado, which is generally a blue state, saying there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of lawlessness.
Yes.
I don't know what to do here. Who's looking out after me?
And I think when that is paired with divestment from the social safety net, when that is paired with lack of progress on minimum wage, when that is paired with rising costs of living, it sets the stage for a strong man to point to any marginalized group and say it's their fault, instead of looking at the gross income inequality that we have and its actual causes in the United States. And so that, I think, is the quandary that Republicans find themselves in, because even on the debate stage, you had Vice President Vance and others trying to say that undocumented people are why we have a housing crisis in this country. And they can fulfill their entire agenda. You will never deport your way into more affordable rent. You're never going to deport your way into being able to make your mortgage meet or make your groceries more affordable. In fact, mass deportations may only make those things much more expensive, actually. And in my view, people voted to lower their groceries. People voted to try to make their lives affordable. And right now, the Trump administration is already running into roadblocks into fulfilling that promise. And they are in trouble. And that's an issue they're going to have to contend with.
I think my main problem with AOC at this point is that I'm not seeing any kind of visionary leadership or argument. I'm seeing stale Democrat talking points that put her in a position of just total unlikability. Because it's like, I don't even necessarily disagree with some of the point made. It's just like, okay, the Democrats are not offering any kind of program for any of that either. We've had 12 years of Democratic presidents. Like 3 out of the last, 5 terms have been Democrats. And they didn't raise the minimum wage. They haven't raised the minimum wage since 2007, guys. Like, it's 2025. The last minimum wage bill can vote now.
Recent dispute, if that's the right word, with Tom Homan.
Like, she says lack of progress, and it's like, well, the lack of progress happened under a Democratic trifecta. I need to hear a little bit more critique of the Democratic Party as well, not just the like, oh, we tried to give them everything they wanted on immigration and they didn't do it, is not going to cut it.
President's Homeland Security czar, so-called. You held an online forum, a Know Your Rights forum, that he didn't like. What were you doing? What was your goal as you saw it?
My job is to educate and act as a liaison of critical information to my constituents. And I was informing all of my constituents of their constitutional protections, and in particular, their constitutional protections against illegal search and seizure in the United States.
Homan was upset, I suppose, because he felt that you were giving advice to people who were here illegally. Mm-hmm. Were you?
I was giving advice to all of my constituents. Yeah.
He said he was going to report you, or even that he did reach out to the Department of Justice.
Thanks for the
Have
1,000.
you heard from the Department of Justice?
I have not, and I intend on reaching out to the Department of Justice to inquire.
Really? What would your question be for the Department of Justice?
Well, there is a member of the Trump administration who is threatening and seeks to open an inquiry, and are you going to do it?
What would you learn? What do you hope to learn from that exchange?
I think it's important to know where this administration stands and if they intend on using political intimidation to silence their critics.
The interim U.S. attorney here in Washington, D.C., where we are, Ed Martin has several times said he has reached out to specific Democratic lawmakers, such as Chuck Schumer, the Senate Democratic leader, to ask for clarification about various remarks that he regarded as threatening. I'm interested if you or your fellow Democrats are at all feeling intimidated or silenced or anything.
I'm not. I think it's important to call this administration's bluff. I think that this is what authoritarians do. I think this is what kleptocracies do. I believe that this is what corrupt administrations do. They rely on the illusion of power, on the suggestion of coercion in order to try to get people to comply in advance. And I think that one of our largest responsibilities is to not comply in advance. If they want to do these things, they can go ahead and do them and let the American people see what they intend to do.
Do you think there is a real risk
so
of lawmakers?
when they do it, then what? What if they do coerce you?
Is being investigated, charged, arrested?
Potentially. I mean, we see that this administration is certainly wielding that threat, and we will have to see if they intend on carrying out their threats. If they are to be believed for what they are publicly suggesting, then the answer would be yes. But we will only find out if we call their bluff.
Do you think other Democrats are watching their words?
I think it's certainly possible, but I'm not sure. I mean, I cannot think of or point to any individuals who have said that. I do think that there are Democratic members of Congress who are preparing for that possibility.
How do they prepare?
I think they look to the possibility of litigation. I think they're saying, you know, do we have the best teams possible in order to carry out our work?
Some Republican, or many perhaps, will be watching this, listening to this, and thinking, wait a minute, actually, you're the ones who are prosecuting us. You were the guys who are weaponizing the Justice Department. How would you respond to somebody who may be thinking that?
In what way? In what way? Is the very presence
Putting Trump on trial would be their example, I suppose.
Yes. I mean, here's the deal. In the United States, there is a jury where we are judged by our peers, and he was found guilty in court on 34 felony charges. If people want to say it was weaponized, I mean, it is hard pressed to say that there's a partisan argument for that. You have Senator Menendez famously.
We down here in Jackson, Mississippi, have filed an indictment for AOC because she is a criminal communist sympathizer, and we have got down 12 good old boys down in the jury, and we have convicted her of all charges. And as she said, there's no way to do a weaponization as long as a jury of Americans votes to convict somebody. There's no way that can be weaponized. What the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck are you talking about? This is a terrible argument. Just say he was convicted of a crime according to due process of law. And they are making him above the law, and they don't have any legal arguments other than he's the king. And I don't believe in having a king. Make political arguments that don't suck.
Democratic senator from New Jersey.
Democratic senator from New Jersey.
Convicted. Yeah.
And to 11 years in prison, I believe. We see over and over again that there has historically been an independent Justice Department whose job it is to be separate and apart from the presidency and the executive branch. Just because someone was held to an equal standard of the law does not mean that the Justice Department was weaponized. However, what is weaponization is that same previously independent Department of Justice.
This is what's like crazy is it's like you're trying to defend an institution that no longer exists. Joe Biden's Department of Justice is gone. Donald Trump, when he says it was weaponized, now that he's in power, handed the keys by Joe Biden, who said, "Welcome home, Donald." They're going to weaponize it now. So you need to be like, the reality is Donald Trump has destroyed our institutions. First, he's corrupted it, and now he plans to use it. And that's why we need radical change. I don't know, like, what the fucking political strategy even is here. Is it to say that you should trust the institutions right before they start, like, arresting people like yourself? Like, what are you talking about?
And the U.S. Attorney's Office now turning around saying, we are not the American people's lawyers anymore.
I honestly don't even hate AOC. I just think that she's not. This just isn't it. I don't know what to say. This just sucks. Bad advice.
President's lawyers. And that is a dramatic shift. That is a dramatic change in the structure of our justice system.
It seems clear you would want to make a case then that this is a corrupt administration that's abusing power. Does the Democratic Party have some challenge in making that case, though, because of certain things that go on in the Democratic Party, or even in your state of New York, or your city of New York, where your mayor is Eric Adams?
Yeah.
Who was indicted until recently, just for starters.
Well, I think it is important that we be not hypocritical in that. I've called for Mayor Eric Adams, to resign or be removed if he refuses to do so. And this is what equal treatment in the eyes of the law means. It's that if you are a Democrat, if you are a Republican, we should both be held to the same standards. In fact, it's not even about the absence of corruption. It's the willingness to take corruption to account, to hold it to account, independent of one's party affiliation. And in Mayor Adams's case, what I think is transpiring is that, and again, what we saw coming out of the Southern District of New York, also in recent resignation.
What has happened to her speaking style? She's become so much more circuitous. And like using so much more passive language we have seen coming out of. It's like she listened to Kamala Harris and was like, "Yes, queen." Like, what happened? What the fuck happened to AOC? Is she okay? This is like the worst interview I've ever seen her do.
And the letters that were made public is that there was
circuitous, going around in circles, serpentine, not going directly to the point, long-winded, verbose.
A pretty explicit quid pro quo arrangement that these attorneys saw in Mayor Adams approaching the Trump administration, saying, "Hey, you let me off the hook, and I will exchange public policy implementation," which is just as damning, not only for Eric Adams, it's also equally damning in terms of corruption of the Trump administration.
Is there another problem Democrats face because you would like government to work? And there's a broad perception, including among many liberals and progressives, that government doesn't work very well. It takes forever to build something in this country, to give a very obvious example. We do have a couple million federal workers, and a lot of people aren't sure how those people really touch their lives or do anything for them. Do you think government really isn't working well enough?
I think it's not just, it is about our society writ large is completely slanted so that the gains that we have go to the wealthy, go to the corporate class, go to the largest corporations in America who pay the least in taxes, and everyday working people who pay much higher percentages of their income in taxes, seeing the least benefit in society. And that is a governance problem. It is a social problem. It is an economy-wide problem. And I think the boiling rage that exists at this sense of injustice that you are...
Okay, she's bringing it back. Okay, let's go. We've got the boiling rage that you are working two jobs. You are scared to go to the doctor because you don't think that you'll be even able to afford a blood test, that you're working tirelessly and you're not even making... For a ceasefire?
$8-9 an hour in a lot of places in this country. I think that is what we consistently see. And then on top of it, everything feels increasingly like a scam. That not only are grocery prices going up, but it's like everything has a fee and a surcharge. And I think that anger is put out at government. It is put out at a lot of different areas.
I honest to God hate this shit. Honest to God, this is pundit brain. This is what I hate. Whenever I see somebody infected with this in politics, I know they're going nowhere. Her job she should just be an avatar of the anger and be like, people are pissed off because they can't afford to live. And nothing Trump is doing is going to affect that. He's blaming immigrants so that he can rob the federal government. Make some arguments that are tight. Everything is so long-winded. It's like it's like she never thought about it before. It's like somebody giving a book report without reading the book.
Areas.
Yeah, and meandering.
In terms of efficiency, our government can be tremendously efficient for the wealthy, but inefficient at times in delivering things for working people. That is not the same thing as justifying cutting the very few things that people actually interface with, going after the post office, going after the VA, going after Medicaid and Medicare. Those are two entirely different propositions.
Would you like a president to go in and break some china and mess things up, even if you don't like the way this president is trying to do that?
I think when we talk about breaking things, messing things up,
if you wanted to do this well, you would say the one thing that Donald Trump is exposing is that the American people have lost faith in their government. And there are good reasons for that. The problem is that the fox is now in charge of protecting the hen house. Before we had a problem before the problem was excessive corruption. Now we have the corrupt guys directly making deals for their own benefit. He is turning every dysfunction up to 11 as opposed to fixing them. But the American people are so frustrated they're willing to give him a shot because the Democrats told them to shut the fuck up and everything is fine. And that was wrong. She's decided that she needs to this is AOC's downfall in a nutshell, which is she's been convinced somehow that the best bet is to defend the Democratic Party's failures while at the same time trying to message her own message, but do so in a way that doesn't step on the toes of other Democrats. And it's you can't do that and also win over the loyalty and allegiance of regular people. You have to speak cleanly. You have to speak plain spokenly. You have to speak directly, or else you will fail.
I mean, to the FAA, no. To the NIH? No. To our ability to contain Ebola before it gets on a plane and comes into the United States? No. I don't want someone being reckless with the most critical infrastructure. I don't want someone being reckless, abandoning experimental medical devices that are implanted in everyday Americans who have no other recourse because their disease is so far progressed. I actually don't want someone taking a wrecking ball to someone's chemotherapy to just see what happens. Now, I do think that we can examine certain things like Medicare Advantage that I think is a scam, that in the name of so-called efficiency, ironically enough, we have handed over huge amounts of healthcare disbursements to private insurers who are pocketing it and giving less coverage to the people who receive this than ever before. Sure, yeah, let's go after that. But I don't think we just destroy everything that we have worked so hard for as a country to become innovative, to become just, to have some of the only lifelines that people have in this country to a roof over their head or food in their children's stomach. No, I don't think that we gamble with that.
That was fucking dog shit. That was terrible. It's not, again, and it's not because I dislike AOC. It's just she has the worst political advice. And at a certain point, like, she's been in politics for a while. How are you worse at this than you were when you just got in 2018? How are you, like, worse at this?
Representative Ocasio-Cortez, thanks so much for coming by.
Okay, Chad. Yeah. I'm tired. Today was a bad day. I'm too tired. I'm gonna go. I love you all. Hope you have a good rest of your Sunday.